everyone. We don't have microphones, so we can use our voice so you can hear. I first want to thank you. I missed the last meeting, but you all kept me informed, so I am aware of what the discussions have been, and I think we're ready to move forward. In the last year, the commission was free, and we had the current communications tax structure, changes in the communications industry, approaches that other states have taken to reforming their communication taxes. And this year, the commission has discussed the proposals, and you all have various views. So we're going to take those views into consideration. But you know, today, which will probably be the last meeting, I don't know, Madam Co-Chair. She did tell me that she wanted to continue these meetings for another year.
Or come up with some other piece of legislation.
And we do have some information for you, and Senator King.
Okay, thank you. I would like to welcome everyone here today. Let me just start by saying how much I appreciate the time and effort that each one of you have put into this committee. We come from various different views on all this, and I just really respect the time and the effort that each one of you have put into the commission. So, and today will be our last meeting. We have to have a report in by the end of the month. And we have one more proposal that came in about a week ago. I think most of you have gotten, or you should all have gotten it emailed to you. Is there anybody that has not had a chance to look at it? Doug, you're looking at me like you didn't see it.
I'm sorry, is that the June 5th one?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So what I'd like to do is have Scott Mackey just kind of go over this proposal for just kind of a brief overview of it, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you, Senator King. I will be brief. So just a 2-second background. We put 2 proposals forward that were more comprehensive in nature, that would have included doing something about the high local tax burden on wireless. But it became clear when the numbers came back from the comptroller's office that the revenue losses would have been too great, and we didn't think that those proposals were going to move forward and get support at this time. And so the proposal that I submitted last week is a more modest proposal, I guess you'd call it number 3, that would create a statewide tax on communications at a rate of 4%. So it would be a reduction for wireless and pay TV. It would be an increase from 2% to 4% for telecom, landline services currently subject to the gross receipts tax, and it would bring cable and video into the mix to pay the 4% tax as well. This proposal is not perfect. It doesn't address, it narrows but does not completely address the disparity between wireless and other types of communications services, but it does narrow that disparity. It also eliminates the taxation of business inputs and the discriminatory portion of the property taxes in a way that local governments are made whole, and so we think it improves the tax structure that way. It's not a perfect plan. We think it's a step in the right direction, and we'd like to see this proposal move out of this committee, get before the legislature as sort of a first step toward overall communications tax reform in Maryland. And so it's in that spirit that we put this proposal on the table. In addition, there would be a $17 million in additional funding that would be available from going slightly higher than the revenue neutral rate to fund some expansion of broadband to rural and underserved areas. So in a nutshell, that's the proposal. I think everybody's had a chance to review it, and I guess I look forward to the reaction and discussion we're going to have about it today as we decide how to move forward. Thank you.
Okay. Do we want to take a few minutes and have some discussion on it? Anybody have any comments on the proposal?
I'll just to reiterate what Scott's saying. And if you look back when we were first talking about this, when we were testifying, trying to get the bill passed to get the commission, and a lot of things we were talking about is how much the communications industry has changed and continues to change But the tax laws, and not just Maryland, a lot of states' tax laws are written like it was still, we're still all using a rotary telephone to communicate. And that, creates, what we asserted at that time is that it creates a lot of inequities between companies. Now with convergence of cable and telephone and everybody kind of competing against each other, the old laws create a lot of inequities and kind of pick winners and losers among different companies. And also, it makes the state is relying on certain revenue streams that are going away and are probably never coming back. And I think one of the benefits of this commission that's really helped, I think, as we've looked at it and all the great work the Comptroller's Office has done, is really proven out everything we said, probably even more so than we originally thought, that there really needs to be some changes to update the state's laws to try to treat everyone fairly and treat everyone equally as this industry continues to change. So, with this proposal here, we think it's a good first step. It doesn't address everything, but it does start to erase some of the inequities that are out there, and I think it'd be a good way to start, and then we could work off of that and try to make it where whatever the dominant communications network is in the future, which nobody really knows, it will be taxed fairly with the other companies.
Explain to me the revenue here, you're talking about $17 million going to the broadband and another 4.8 that's holding the locals harmless. That's coming from new tax revenue, I assume, and is that coming from the state to these, or where is that, how is that being proposed to go into those funds?
Yeah, that would be coming from the 4% communications tax. There would be new revenue coming into the system. There would be some taxes reduced and some raised. And then when the comptroller staff can answer the specifics, but essentially what happens is if you bring the revenue neutral rate up from around 3.7 to 3.8% to an even 4, that generates a little extra money. What we're proposing is that the roughly $5 million that would be lost to the local governments from having to bring their rates down to the general business level would be backfilled by the state, and that the other 17 million, the legislature, I guess, would have to determine if it were to take this report up, whether to keep the rate at a flat 4 and use that 17 million for broadband deployment, or you could actually slightly bring the rate down to make it fully revenue neutral. But to answer your question, yes, it would be coming through new taxes coming into the overall mix.
John?
Yeah, thank you. First, I want to just thank everyone for the hard work, and I know these proposals are not easy to pull together, and it's really been interesting to look through and try to digest these all. As a representative of Comcast, I just have to point out that our customers will be bearing the largest brunt of the new tax. When you look at the proposal, the differences in proposed revenue and the differences versus current law, $61.5 million of the additional revenue come from our video customers. That's a huge burden on our customers that are not receiving any other relief through this bill or through this proposal in any meaningful way. We've talked a lot about the franchise fee, but it's important to understand the reason we talk a lot about the franchise fee is that's what our video customers pay. If that 61 million could be offset by the franchise fee portion, it's a proposal we can look at and make sense out of because our customers would receive a benefit. As this proposal is in front of us today, it simply doesn't provide our customers with a benefit. And that's just not something that we could support on behalf of our customer base.
There was one more thing I forgot to mention. I'm not going to respond to your comment. I think it's well taken. But on the comptroller's distributional tables where they looked at the effective tax rates before and after, I mean, I don't take issue with them except for the fact that I think if you take a look at what the average household spends on wireless service, it's a lot more than $50. And this analysis uses sort of an assumption of a $50, how much would the wireless customer save from going from 6% to 4%, assuming a $50 expenditure on wireless service. And I don't know about anybody around this table, but anybody with kids or multiple phones within a household, the bill's a lot more than 50. So while I don't take any issue with any of the work the comptroller's done around this, I think that the savings for the wireless consumers are going to be larger than perhaps what's in these distributional tables, and are going to offset some of the increase that those same customers would pay if they have either direct TV or cable service. So I'm not in any way saying that that diminishes what Mr. Cromwell's argument is, and I understand it. But I do think that the impact on the customer is perhaps not going to be as great on the typical Maryland household as shown in these tables. And I just wanted to put that out there for the record.
Thank you very much. I wanted to ask if any analysis has been done on the impact on the business community with this proposal. I'm very, very much in favor of equity, but I do have, as a small business advisor of almost 30 years, I have a hypersensitive interest in making sure we're not harming business. So I guess I'm curious if any analysis has been done.
Well, largely we stuck to consumers. I think the bill didn't specifically mention business, looking at how that affects them, said these consumer effects. But I think the data we provided can allow you to analyze that on your own.
Okay, if I might just comment for the record then, I know that my many clients would appreciate that, business clients, that we do not make things any tougher for them.
Madam Chair, if I could add to that, thank you very much. Yes, I would appreciate the information about the business community too, because Art and I do view businesses also as consumers. And in fact, the numbers that consumers pay for these services is probably a multiple of the numbers that are in your charges in here. Practically every business has cell phones, data plans. Yes, only a few use cable TV in their businesses, but to the extent that there is cost increases to Maryland's already high cost of doing business, and that comes from a lot of studies that we've all talked about in the committees, and that's problematic. To the extent that there are savings for those business consumers who would be seeing a trade-off and a reduction in their costs, that is something that would be very helpful.
Comments?
Yeah, Ray Wax representing Maryland Association of Counties. I want to start out by thanking you for putting on the table a difficult proposal that I think represents the principles that we felt were important in terms of preserving local revenue. That's important because local revenue has been under assault for these past several years as the state has struggled with how to deal with its revenue crisis. I think the concern we would have with the proposal, again, is in the paying back of the loss of the $4.9 million and how that process would work. And we're concerned about setting up another process where we'd be dependent on the states putting the money in the BRFIT each year to make sure that it was there. I think what we've seen over the past couple of years is when things get tough, local governments have paid the price, and that's something that we would need clarification on.
Well, I'm going to suggest my own proposal on this afternoon. I think there are really still a lot of different opinions on where we need to end up with this. And the bottom line is that the committees are going to be the ones that make the decisions on this, the budget and tax, I assume, or finance, and the Ways and Means Committee. So my proposal would be that we send these proposals as a finding to the committees. That would be our report coming out of this committee. That way, we let the committees make those decisions as to what the best thing to do would be. Any comments on that? Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As the representative for the Maryland Chamber of Commerce, I'd like to respond to your point and first make another point. I appreciate the opportunity to be part of this commission, and thank you everyone for the hard work. I've learned a lot, and I have several members of the Maryland Chamber in the room, and I recognize that they have different needs and different priorities, as we just mentioned in the business community, I have hundreds of other members who are consumers of the services that we've been talking about in these, and they're interested in the work. And in addition to that perspective, I've come to these meetings having to have the eye of the CPA who's been doing tax consulting for a bunch of years. And some of the comments that have already been made, I have to echo. I've lived through 30 years of changes to our communications tax structure, and yet we're really in a messy situation right now that needs change. We started several decades ago with a tax structure with a gross receipts tax because the companies were considered monopolies and that was considered the best way of taxing them, but it was instead of a corporate income tax. And then over the years, we've had changes to that, and the companies are now subject to the corporate income tax in addition to the 2% gross receipts. And yet there are also now some things that are subject to sales tax, some things that aren't. The property tax is still treated, assessed differently and taxed differently in the different rates. So we have really an antiquated and messy situation right now. And from the CPA perspective and from the business person's perspective of thinking about tax policy, of trying to be fair, treat similar customers and similar businesses the same, of being simple to understand, simple to comply with, etc. You know, I'm all for moving forward with recommendations that change our that change our tax structure. To add to your proposal about findings, again, thinking like the CPA, but also learning a lot from these meetings, it was very clear that one of the sticking points in our discussions was the franchise fees. And the statute that set up the commission instructed us to look at local taxes and fees. And we've had some very spirited discussions about whether franchise fees should be included. Are they taxes or are they fees? There's been evidence put forth that the franchise fee that's currently being paid, and the staff's report in October told us that the franchise fee is a payment for the use of right-of-way, and yet the companies are asserting that the amount that they're paying is more than just a payment for the property that they're using and the services that they're getting. And so that's left with the implication that, well, the excess is a tax. So my suggestion would be, is it possible to add to your recommendation about the findings that the issue of the local franchise fees needs to be studied more as a second piece. You know, here are the findings about the taxes, with quotes around that word, and the franchise fees and local fees need more time and more study because that is a big piece of the overall structure. Yes.
I appreciate all the work that's been done on this, and I know that the staff has become experts in an area that they probably didn't know a lot when they started, and I appreciate all of that. And that I think that I want to sort of come back to a couple meetings ago. We had talked about trying to come up with something that then would be in play in the legislative. I think at the last meeting and what Scott had addressed, one of the results of doing this analysis is understanding that at the local level, there does need to be more information, more analysis of it. For a variety of reasons, the staff has not broken out a lot of that data at the local level because they wanted to comply with the statute to keep some privacy of that. And in places where you only have one provider, they were reluctant to provide that data. So that said, in the last meeting that we'd had, I thought that we had somewhat coalesced around the idea that it was possible to move forward on addressing the state taxes. And it would be my hope, rather than to the analysis, I look at those as they are an analysis under different scenarios. They are not an analysis of what happens, what's used with the revenue, or how that promotes deployment. But where we did seem to find agreement was that addressing the state piece, there are some, the devil's in the detail. There are some of those, but a recommendation in which it seems to be an achievable goal is to actually address the state component of it And then, as a longer term, look at some of the issues related to the local issues. That maybe, rather than just simply saying, here's the analysis that we did, that what we could coalesce around in the final report is that a recommendation is that we actually address the state taxation portion, because we do have an opportunity there to get to a point where we have a simplified tax structure, we have a broader tax base, and we have a lower overall rate.
Yes, Wayne Strasburg, Maryland Associated Counties. I just have a question for you. You're proposing to adjust the property tax rate from the personal property rate to the real property rate. Am I correct in assuming that the assessment approach would not change? Because as I understand it now, the assessment approach is based on an income model.
Yeah, the only thing we're looking at, the only issue we have, the inequity is created through the rate differential.
Okay.
And for non-utility companies, they pay one rate of personal property, and then that's 2.5 times the real property
Right.
rate. So essentially, the real property is taxed less. But for utility companies, we're taxed, everything is at that personal property rate. There is no
Right.
discount on real property. So we're not looking at changing anything in the way that non-utility property is assessed, how they do it.
So the
based on
assessment
cost.
basis would
We'd still do
remain the same.
unit.
It'd be helpful to
valuation.
clarify that, I think, in the report that you make.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments? Yes, Doug?
From the municipal point of view, I think we agree with the concerns raised by the counties about paying back taxes and what happens when there's financial pressures on the state budget and having that money come and disappear. That's a big concern for us. We, at least from my standpoint, I'm grateful that the franchise fees and the bank fees have been taken out of this last proposal, and I don't think that there should be any further study on those. I would not see the benefit of that, and I would object to that. I have a couple of questions also, and I don't mean them to be argumentative. Questions are, what is the benefit to the state as an entity of this latest proposal? I see benefits for different segments of the industry. What is the benefit for state government?
I mean, I don't pretend to have all the answers, but I guess I would answer that by saying that the benefit would be if you create a tax structure where like services are paying the same, then as the nature of the industry changes, and we don't know, as Mike said, we don't know what technology is going to win out over another technology in 10 or 20 years, but if you put everything on a level playing field and tax it the same, then I think the state benefits, because no matter what happens with technological change, you're not going to have some revenue sources drying up and others being overly relied on. So you're going to, I think you're going to stabilize the tax base but perhaps expand it by bringing in over-the-top services that are now riding over other networks, and customers are using them as applications and they're not being taxed at all. So I think you're going to create a stable and expanded base that is going to allow the state to have stability in the revenues no matter what changes occur in the marketplace.
That was another question, whether this was just a reshuffling of money or whether it was really reform. Whether it's just raising some people's taxes and lowering others, or is there real reform to take into account the unanswered questions of where we're going with technology in the future? The other, one of the other questions I have is the statute talks about asking us for proposals that encourage broadband deployment. There's 16 or 17 million dollars that's anticipated here. Has there been any analysis of how much broadband is needed and what the cost is and how far $17 million goes?
I'm not aware of any studies. We certainly didn't look at that question. I mean, I think there's an unlimited appetite for broadband. And if there was an unlimited amount of money to invest to bring it to customers, then everybody would be happy, but there isn't. And I have not been, I haven't looked at it from that aspect. I don't know the answer. I'm not sure there is one answer, but I don't know it.
Madam Chair, I think it's difficult to take a position on that part of it without knowing the need that's out there and the cost of it. You know, if it's $1 million a mile, then you've got 17 miles of broadband deployment, which doesn't.
Well, I think what we could do with that is along with this report this report of findings that we send to the committees, we can flag the issues of the counties and the issues you're talking about as things that we need to study further. We need to have more information on, or that they need to have more information on.
And also, the other part of the equipment exemption is also going to help for that development too. When the equipment that we're investing in the state is not subject to sales tax, that should increase that investment because it'll be at a lower price. So it's sort of a 1-2 punch there, kind of. Those should help that.
That was another one of my questions and points, is that the proposal is pretty nebulous in saying network equipment. And I think that's an area, when it gets to the committees, where, again, the devil's going to be in the details. If I'm a cable company, I can make an argument that everything from the plant in the right-of-way into my headquarters is network equipment, and every piece of equipment I buy is network equipment, so it's all exempt. So that's going to have an impact on how much more money the state is going to lose.
I think Laura, you had a comment.
I just wanted to comment on the property tax piece briefly. You mentioned that there was no change indicated in the proposal in the method of valuation. And just to say that if that were to come up in the future, that could be a significant, have a significant revenue impact. So just to make that comment.
Yeah, change the value.
Change, if
change the
method of valuation.
Yeah, because we had looked at that, and that it could swing either way. It could be a lot more money or a lot less money, depending on how it was changed.
So it could be.
That's why we decided to leave that alone and just focus on the rate, which is clearly discriminatory against the utility companies.
Okay.
Thank you, Senator King. On the network equipment exemption, that's conceptual. That's like saying a machinery exemption. Certainly in the drafting, you need to be very detailed about what that covers. And I just want to say from my standpoint, as far as looking at this, as Scott mentioned, this is not a perfect proposition, but I think, and again, somewhat to your point, I do believe this does represent reform because we're looking at trying to conceive of what could be out there in the future and setting up an initial step in taxing any type of new communication service in a similar manner, which I think is a very sound tax principle. And by placing it at that 4% rate, that basically represents a reduction for a huge, I mean, who all has a cell phone in the room? I mean, everyone has a communications device, so you're basically lowering a tax rate that's very ubiquitous, and the trend is moving, more and more to those types of devices away from, from the current landline type of services. So I just want to say it's not perfect, and I've also had to look at it in terms of how would this would this be something I would think would be a right step if we had significant, like if AT&T had significant UVerse presence? And I think I would say that this is a step in the right direction and is something that we could work with. Again, realizing that this is just the beginning step. There's more to come as far as looking at the overall structure and looking at the franchise fees at some later time.
Thank you very much. In the beginning, I heard that maybe we would make recommendations to the committees. And I would not like to see us use the word recommendations because we are not going to come with consensus in this group, with this commission, because we're so diverse in what we are requesting. When we send this to the committees, I would like to go with what you said earlier, that we are submitting to you findings. Because if you say recommendations, that means we're going to take a vote that these are the recommendations that the commission agreed upon. And I don't think we're going to get agreement in here today. But when you give it to the committee, they're going to make the decisions, and you have given them a lot of information to consider. So my recommendation would be not to call them recommendations.
Might be better instead of listing it as findings, as information. Because that's all basically what you want.
Yes, I just didn't want them to think that.
This is some information to start with.
I mean, it's complex enough that this is not all the information that ever is going to be needed by any means. I mean, this is kind of a work in progress, but I think the information that's coming out of this commission is going to be very helpful to committees when they're looking at this whole issue.
So, just to understand what you're proposing, and I think I do, it would be sort of a factual report that says that the commission met, there were 3 proposals considered, the comptroller's office has done the fiscal analysis of these 3 proposals, and here's what the analysis showed, and we're now forwarding to the committees for consideration, something.
Yeah.
I
Are
mean,
you
that's-
okay with that? Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Sue Ellen Ferguson, Maryland Municipal League. We wanted to make sure that our contribution, such as it was, of our principals, was included in the findings, because that is what we have been able to say about the broad view of the municipalities and the counties with respect to whatever plan ends up being taken up, that the principles apply to it. And secondly, I'd just like to repeat, we very much appreciated this last iteration of the proposals. But we do have a concern with municipalities do also, since real property taxes are our basis for income, that local control of that we have not be eroded. That's the 2 things points I'd like to make.
We pretty much agree with that, if that's what we're going to do.
Can you, Madam Co-Chair, you had an opportunity to testify before the committee too. The committee is not going to just make the decisions based on the information we're presenting. You will be called to come before the committee and to make your point again. And then the committee will decide what they're going to do. But they are going to make the decision. They might make the decision not to do anything. They might make, and you all want something to be done. But I think they're going to listen to you. You testify in the Senate, and you testify in the House. You say what you need to say to the governor and others. And I think we'll come up with some good decisions.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair. Delegate Howard, thank you for saying that. What's been in my mind as you were talking about findings of what would be in our report, I, for one, and my guess is I speak for others in the room, that even before the time comes to testify, I would be happy to work with the committee on taking the next steps and pick up where we've left off with these findings. We have business people who know the issues. We have CPAs who deal with these tax calculations and reports all the time. I'd like, want to offer or volunteer our services to work to pick up where we left off even before the hearings as appropriate.
Yes.
We had in the various proposals, and we had talked about in the findings, is there, where there was information that in the Virginia proposal that the revenues had come in lower, one, is that something within the scope of the finding that you're thinking of including, or are you sort of limiting it to just the 4 proposals?
Just before.
Okay. And then the other piece I'm wondering is, do we want to address, nothing in what we've discussed addresses the fact that FiOS doesn't reach the city of Baltimore, and it doesn't reach Washington County, and it doesn't reach the Eastern Shore. Do we want to have something in there that notes that while these proposals are looking at addressing the taxation piece, we did not actually have any findings as to policies that actually encouraged or required the expansion of more communication services to those underserved areas?
The legislation really was more on tax reform. So I think it's an issue that obviously needs to be addressed, but I don't think this commission would be addressing that.
So I guess I would just add there is that, I guess that's part of why we were not looking at having the franchise and focusing just on the taxes. If we were going to talk about the franchising piece, then the fact that it really hasn't changed, the fees haven't changed that deployment would be part of that. And my preference would be is that we keep the report cleaner and focus specifically on the taxes and not on the franchises.
I'm a little hesitant to ask this, so I'll apologize in advance if it doesn't fit with the protocol, but I am particularly interested because of my, what I do for a living, in the impact on businesses in Maryland. And so I want to ask, since we're submitting findings, which is a wonderful idea.
Or information.
Can those findings include an impact statement on business? Small businesses will be helped, will be helped or hurt, medium, large, with some analysis in this?
Well, let me just say that as a Budget and Taxation Committee member, I would be asking that question when the subject comes up anyway. That will be included in that discussion.
Remember, businesses are consumers, that's what you're saying.
Yes.
But I kind of just recommend when we do that, we need to kind of look at the big picture. We all tend to be, Verizon can be kind of parochial and think about how does this one thing affect us, and we can't just look and say, well, is this rate going to go up? How's that going to affect small business? But there's a lot of good things in it for small business too. Say, if we can increase broadband and build out the communications infrastructure in the state through some of the stuff, that's going to be a great benefit for every business in Maryland. So we need to take that into consideration too, not just, well, is this rate going to go up a little bit on this service?
Senator Green, did you have a comment?
I have a lot of comments. I'm about to go ahead and look at the tax.
Okay, so we're in agreement. You said you wanted to make a motion.
I can make a motion for this. My motion for my information.
For your
My information. I think that's what let's go ahead with the proposal. I don't know whether we need a motion for that or whether we can just get it.
Unless there's a major disagreement here, I think that's what we go and we just do. Doug?
I'm a little concerned about the way the report's being portrayed. It sounds pretty sterile to me, which I think could have been done maybe just by staff. I would like to see in there with some of the proposals, things that say, one member's concern was how this is going to impact small businesses. Another, the local governments were concerned about what's going to happen to this tax when there's financial pressure on the state. I'd like to see some of that without going into, great laundry list, but without it.
We can add that on.
Well, I wanted to,
Go ahead.
I want to suggest maybe we provide a link to the website, which will have the minutes from these meetings, including all of your concerns. We committed to keeping that website active indefinitely. We'll have everyone's presentations that we've had, we'll have information on broadband, presentations we have on there. I think that could alleviate a few of these concerns.
Or make it an appendix to the report, to the minutes.
Well, I think especially with the interest, I mean, the concerns of the counties, you know, we can add a paragraph at the end with the different concerns that still need to be addressed. And do that.
And Madam Co-Chair, I was just thinking that any legislation that is discussed, we get the financial analysis and how it's going to impact small businesses already. We do that with everything we are doing. So I don't know how this would be different. And if you want to add the statement, we can add the statement, but it's going to automatically be done. And I know you're going to ask the question, and I'll make sure I ask it in the House.
Like I said, I just think it sounds to me like a fairly sterile report that doesn't take advantage of all the opinions that have been discussed and shared by the people who've been appointed to this commission and who've brought things to the table that are in addition to the financial analysis that staff has prepared. And I think that's a weakness of not including some of that so that the full committees have a flavor of what has been discussed around this table. And
I agree with you there, but I think the proposals, number one, give the committees something really to look at. It's a possibility. But then when the discussion comes up, all of these opinions can be brought back out to the committees also. I mean, even though we've just expressed opinions here, those opinions are they'll need to be addressed to the committees, to the full committees. So I think the main thing is getting those proposals out so that the committees can look at them. Okay. Any other business for this commission?
Well, I think to his point, yeah, all those things are going to be discussed in committee with any legislation, but we could say that, you know, industry has this concern, business has, and just put a few bullet points in there, but not limited to those
Yeah, I think we can.
concerns.
Yeah, I think that can be
You know,
done.
that
Just
way,
make
that
them
way
statements.
everyone's got different issues around this table.
Okay. Again, I would like to really thank everybody for all the time and effort that you've put into this. Obviously, we're going to be calling on you again when legislation comes out to come back and help us to educate our committees. And I look forward to working with you further on this. Something, we know something needs to be done. We just think this is just a really good step forward in that direction. Thank you again for being on this commission and for helping out with it. Thank you.